What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Kyle Lawrence, and I'd like to welcome you to the debut episode of Sports in the US of A. Today, we will be remembering one of the most iconic decades in the history of sports, the 1980s. I'm talking Miracle on Ice, Michael Jordan's emergence into the NBA, the bad boys of the 80s, and how a certain baseball player can set the all-time hit record and get suspended from the MLB for life. Plus, I get to do all of this with one little twist, the uncanny ability to see into the future, say up until 2020 in certain circumstances. All right, let's get started. Let's begin in 1980 with one of the most memorable U.S. hockey wins in the history of this country. I mean, talk about the underdog of the freaking century. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a college hockey player. You're tasked with representing your whole country in the Olympics. And, oh, by the way, you're going up against the four-time defending gold medal winning Soviets. I'm going to give you two scenarios here. Scenario one, your team loses 5-0 because, let's be honest, you're a bunch of college kids playing Russia in hockey. Or scenario two, you go on to win 4-3 in front of 10,000 people in Lake Placid, New York, in a game that will eventually be named the Miracle on Ice. Also, you're going to have a movie made about you. Okay, so you get the idea. The USA hockey team upset the Soviets and went on to beat Finland, claiming the gold. But how in the world did that happen? Well, it went a little like this. After Valery Krotov opened up the scoring and gave the Soviets an early 1-0 lead, the USA answered with a goal from Buzz Schneider to tie it up. Sergei Marikov quickly scored and regained the Soviet lead. And then, with the first period winding down, Mark Johnson scored with only a second left. End of the first period, and it's 2-2. After a high-scoring first, only a single goal was scored in the second, and the Soviets took a 3-2 lead into the last 20 minutes of the game. Alright, we're in the third period. Fast forward 9 minutes, and David Silk ties it up. Not 2 minutes later, Captain Michael Ruzioni rips a 25-foot wrister past Vladimir Mishkin to give the USA their first lead of the game with 10 minutes remaining. After what seemed like an eternity, the final seconds ticked off the clock and the Miracle on Ice was born. Now, let's move on to 1984. A basketball player I think could be very good for many, many years to come. His name? Michael Jordan. He's a rookie out of North Carolina with the work ethic of an ox. After just 1 year in the NBA, his resume reads this: Rookie of the Year and All-Star. Not too shabby if you ask me. He averaged 28.2 points per game on 52% shooting from the field, 5.9 assists, and 2.4 steals with an 84% free throw percentage. Again, not too shabby. For those of you who aren't quite sure what any of that means, or just how ridiculously good that is, I'll do the legwork for you and give you a couple comparisons. Larry Bird averaged 21.3 points on 47% shooting from the field his rookie year. Magic Johnson averaged 18 points on 53% shooting, and as a point guard only averaged 2 more assists per game than Jordan did. Only 5 other players in the history of the NBA have averaged more points per game in their rookie season. Number 1, Wilt Chamberlain. Number 2, Walt Bellamy. Number 3, Oscar Robertson. Number 4, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And number 5, Elvin Hayes. All of those players, except for Hayes, won Rookie of the Year, and all of them are currently in the Hall of Fame. Pretty good company. I'd say it's safe to say this Michael Jordan kid is going to go on to have a pretty good career, and if I had to take a wild guess, I'd say he'll end up with 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs, 10 scoring titles, 5 MVPs, 11 All-NBA nods, and 9 All-Defensive nods. But who knows? Guess we'll just have to let his career play out. For the next topic, I'm going to stay in the NBA, but transition a little later in the decade, into 1989, and welcome the bad boys of basketball, the Detroit Pistons. Throughout the 80s, the Pistons were able to culminate a lineup consisting of Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Vinnie Johnson, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, James Edwards, Rick Mahorn, and John Saley. These men, led by head coach Chuck Daly, became one of the most feared teams in the NBA and rode their extremely physical and relentless style of play all the way to the 1989 championship. Now, the Pistons' No Rules Act didn't fly with everybody and created bad blood between them and many of the other teams they faced. This quote from the NBA website on their series against the Boston Celtics is a pretty good one. Not only was there hatred amongst the teams on the court, but the venom spread to the pages of newspapers and magazines. Both Celtics play-by-play man Johnny Most and team president Red Auerbach said that the Pistons were classless bullies. Not to be deterred by the media, though, the Pistons went on to sweep the Celtics, beat the Milwaukee Bucks in 4 games, beat Jordan's Bulls in 6, and gave themselves a second chance at the Los Angeles Lakers. Sure, the Pistons only lost a couple of games on their way to demolishing the East, but the Lakers were coming off back-to-back championships, had Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, and had not lost a playoff game yet. Yes, you heard that right. In the 3 series before this, they won every game, did not lose. But what they did lose was Byron Scott and Magic Johnson to injuries, and the physicality of the Pistons was too much, and they swept the Lakers and claimed the elusive Larry O'Brien trophy. All right, the last thing I want to talk about today is Pete Rose. He is one of the greatest baseball players of all time, yet he has zero chance of being inducted into the Hall of Fame. He is the all-time leader in hits with 4,256, all-time leader in games played with 3,562, all-time leader in at-bats, 14,053, and the all-time leader in singles with 3,215. His greatness simply cannot be disputed. So, why doesn't he have a shot at the Hall of Fame? Well, it goes back to 1989, when it became known that Rose was gambling on his own team as manager for the Cincinnati Reds. In an effort to get to the bottom of it, MLB Commissioner hired lawyer John Dowd, who was able to acquire hundreds of hours of testimony detailing Rose's gambling problem. Rose accepted a settlement that banned him from baseball for life. This meant, and still means, he cannot coach or work for a major league team in any regard, and, worst of all, despite ridiculous stats, is not eligible for the Hall of Fame. If you want my opinion, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he's not allowed into the Hall, especially considering what the Houston Astros do in 2017, using that time traveling again, to which they received virtually little to no consequences. For anyone that doesn't know, the Houston Astros used a computer program to systematically steal signs from opposing pitchers and used that to go on to win the 2017 World Series. Seems a little worse than maybe gambling, but who am I to say? Anyways, Pete Rose is an all-time great, has the statistics to back it up, and certainly does not deserve this. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I want to say thank you for tuning in and listening to the very first episode of Sports in the US of A. I hope you walk away with a little more knowledge of sports in the 80s, but most of all, I hope I was able to offer up a sense of nostalgia for one of the greatest eras in sports. Next week, I'll be continuing my analysis and coverage of sports in the 80s with the Showtime Lakers, the Chicago Bears' great defense of 85, and the cocaine-sniffing, pill-popping, and booze-guzzling 1986 New York Mets. Anyways, I'm Kyle Lawrence, and this was Sports in the US of A.